So Kevin Stefanski spoke today. When this video comes out to you guys, it will technically be yesterday, but he did break the news to the Browns media and Browns fans that Shedeur Sanders will be the starter. What he said was for just the San Francisco game, but if you kind of read between the lines, he said Dillon Gabriel did clear concussion protocol this past weekend and would be able to play in this San Francisco 49ers game coming up next weekend. So to me, that really just means that Shedeur is the starting quarterback for this team moving forward. Essentially, it's his job to lose. So to me, if he plays good, he'll continue to be the quarterback. We know that Dillon was drafted ahead of Shedeur, so there's definitely a chance that if Shedeur plays like crap coming up soon, that they could always return to Dillon being the starting quarterback, which obviously would create quite the storm throughout the fan base and the media as well. But it's definitely something that could happen. I want to start by kind of talking about the fact that I am a fan. And this is a positive about Kevin Stefanski, because I feel like there's been a lot of negative with Kevin so far this season. So this is something he's done. He did good, and I was a fan of. I liked how he just came out on Monday and said that Shedeur will be the starter. He didn't kick this news down the road at all and push it back to Wednesday, which I think is something that I was almost 100% sure that he was going to do. So he kind of pleasantly surprised me and I think a lot of Browns fans by just coming out the day after the game where Shedeur played and, addressing the issue that everyone wants to hear about and stating that Shedeur will be the starter in this game. And I also was encouraged by the fact that he did break the news that Dillon did clear concussion protocol, so he would be able to play in this one. To me, that's positive on a couple fronts. First off, not to play like the conspiracy role, but I think that there was always a chance that they could kind of say, Dillon's head injury is a little worse than we thought, and we're going to just let Shedeur play another week to just get more of a sample size before they come to the conclusion. But also, I think it expresses confidence in the way Shedeur played on Sunday to a level to where they are willing to, start him and not feel the need to kind of sugarcoat the benching of, a guy who they drafted ahead of him. To me, that's just a good sign for kind of the confidence maybe building in the coaching staff, in the locker room, obviously with the fan base as it, relates to Shedeur Sanders playing for the Browns. So I was a fan of the press conference that Kevin held today. That was the one thing obviously everyone wanted to know, and I think for the vast majority of the fan base, we got the news that we wanted to hear today, and obviously, a bit of a pleasant surprise. So that's the big news, obviously, kind of coming out of Cleveland. But on my end, I, spoke to it after the game last night, talking about how we definitely needed to get more into the tape and kind of get a better understanding of how Shedeur did play in this game. Now, in doing so, I think a couple things come to light whenever you view the tape, and especially whenever you're looking at like a rookie quarterback type tape. Because quite frequently, we watch these games that these rookies play, and it seems like they're throwing a ton of checkdowns, and especially for the Browns, like we saw it with Dillon, we've seen it with Shedeur, with Deshaun, who pretty much was playing like a rookie last year, and DTR, we saw it with them. Like they seemed to be afraid to throw the ball down the field. So, whenever you do watch the tape, you kind of are able to find out, A, is this something that was just in the scheme and like these guys just didn't have the options available downfield to them? Or B, were they just not seeing it and not throwing the ball down the field, not trusting the routes that were being run, not throwing with the anticipation. And those would be big issues. Like, so obviously, you don't want to see a quarterback not throwing the ball down the field, but even more than that, you don't want the reason to be because they are just not seeing it. And I think, with Shedeur yesterday, I saw a stat that of his 11 completions, 6 of them were behind the line of scrimmage. Now, obviously, we know he was able to have explosive plays. Like, there was 3 plays where I believe, it was a completion over 30 yards in that game yesterday. So it's not like that aspect of his game was non-existent in this one, but there was an aspect of, heavy training wheels on Shedeur. And so that was my takeaway. My first takeaway watching the tape was this was an offense that maybe it was Kevin. I'm sure it was Kevin, and I'm sure Tommy Rees had some say as well, but their whole game plan was to kind of keep Shedeur, to keep the training wheels on him and avoid the big mistake that, no one wanted to see. And I think for me, that makes sense in a game like this past weekend. It makes sense in a game where it's Shedeur's first real start, and you want to build his confidence. And not to mention, the game starts and you're up 7-0 and then 14-0 before before the end of the fourth quarter, and you're playing a Raiders team who can't move the ball, can't even get a first down really on your defense. So I think all of these things kind of play into the fact and play into the reality that I found when watching the tape, which was that there just wasn't much opportunity or much design in these plays for Shedeur to throw the ball down the field. And like I said, makes sense in this one. But for me, as we progress into these, there's only 6 games left this season, and I touched on it a little bit yesterday, but we need to know, how confident can we be in Shedeur, potentially being some sort of an answer going into next season. Is this a guy who we think maybe can be a bridge at the very minimum if they play themselves out of a draft spot this year to get a quarterback? Or is it someone who we can legitimately build around? That's what this season has always been about. And with that said, you cannot play every game, involving these training wheels for Shedeur where the majority of his passes are behind the line of scrimmage. Like, we need to see what the guy can do. We need to let him play quarterback. And that's when I think we will learn the most about Shedeur as a quarterback in this league. Of course, it was extremely positive to see, Shedeur making some game-changing plays like we saw him make yesterday. And those are the things we want to see more of. And I think as someone who does believe Shedeur can be a successful quarterback in this league, I think the more we take these training wheels off, the more we'll see even better stats, but also, plays from Shedeur. Giving him the opportunity to throw the ball beyond 5 to 10 yards down the field. It's a guy who built his college career around throwing the ball further than 5 to 10 yards down the field. Like, he's a play extender. He likes to make big plays. He's not as much of a play within the structure guy, although we've seen him be able to do that too. But I really do think Kevin and Tommy and the offensive staff need to accelerate the kind of expectations and ability for Shedeur to make plays in this offense as we do progress into the 49ers game and hopefully 5 more games after that. So that's my first takeaway. I really, in watching the tape, to me, there wasn't a lot of plays that Shedeur. I think there was only 2 plays that I can think of where there was a legitimate option that Shedeur just either missed the throw or was just sped up too much and wasn't able to get to the correct read. So with that, how many yards did he really leave on the table in this one? I'm not sure. I can't confidently say that Shedeur, if he played a perfect game and hit every, open receiver, he would have even gotten over like 250, 260 yards. It just wasn't that game plan for him this week. So that was my major takeaway watching the tape, kind of giving it to you in an overarching type view. Obviously there's much more minutia going by play, and like I said yesterday, we saw good and bad from him. That is still true. Like, we saw the wow plays, we saw the interception where, yes, on tape, it was exactly like we all thought. He just got fooled. There was an end that he kind of thought was, you'd have to ask him in that moment, but he either thought the end was pass rushing or kind of going out to the flank and guarding the halfback on the out route that he was running out there. But in reality, of course, we all know he dropped in and was able to kind of undercut the ball that Shedeur threw in that spot. So, yeah, he got fooled on that one. That was a classic rookie mistake. Those are the type of interceptions that you expect from any rookie. Successful ones make those mistakes. I'm sure you could go and find Jaden Daniels last year, and although he really didn't throw many interceptions, but he's kind of an outlier. You pick out any quarterback you want. Drake May in some of his games last year, and I'm sure he has some interceptions just like that. So, yeah, there wasn't a ton to learn watching the tape. My biggest takeaway was just that Shedeur really did what was asked of him in this one. And it wasn't much. He was not asked to do much. So, that kind of wraps up the Shedeur takeaways from watching the game tape, but I did want to note one thing, and it's that the run game is just simply not good enough for a Kevin Stefanski offense. If you want to run a West Coast style offense where you're developing the run game and you're kind of building the pass game off of that, it can work, spectacularly. We see it in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan. We see it with the Rams, although they've built that offense to be way more than just that. With McVay and Matt Stafford and what they've built there. So we know it can be successful. But the thing is, you have to have an efficient, effective run game that teams truly respect, or else you're really putting the whole entire team, the whole entire offense in a very, very negative position off the bat. And the reason I make that note after watching this version, or this past game, I should say, more closely is that the offense was consistently getting themselves either behind the sticks, so 2nd and 11, 3rd and 9, or 3rd and predictable throwing situations. Like I said, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 8. Like this was a constant reoccurring thing going on in this game. And Shedeur did bail the team out on a couple occasions. Shedeur did. Harold Fannin did. But the offense itself was still not operating super effectively. And it boils down to the fact that our offensive line play isn't good enough. Judkins averaged 2.9 yards per carry, and this has been a reoccurring theme for Quinshawn so far this year, and I don't think any of us actually blame him for it. The offensive line creates no push. They get pushed back almost every single play. And Shedeur is getting hit behind the line of scrimmage way too often. I saw it countless times in this game where Judkins, he gets the ball and half a second later, not even half a second later. Max Crosby, you name a player on the Raiders defensive line, is just sitting there waiting for him. So if we can't fix those things, it's going to be really, really tricky for Shedeur to put up some really good numbers in this offense, or any quarterback not named Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen or maybe Patrick Mahomes. Like, I don't even think Joe Burrow could, because I don't know. It's just the offense is so inept in the areas that they need to be successful. In one win against a bad Raiders team, where we saw a young, talented quarterback make some plays, does not fix that. That was my takeaway watching the tape. It was better than some games. Don't get me wrong. Of course it was. Like, we scored 24 offensive points, but it was not to where it needs to be. And I think one of the keys for Kevin to end this season is getting the offense back to being efficient and maybe at least, hopefully, league average. And that's assuming Shedeur can offer a little bit more than some of these other quarterbacks that we've seen so far this year. Like, that's key for him. And then hopefully being able to build on that while also getting some more talented players, throughout the entire offense this offseason. So yeah, those two things in this tape really went hand in hand with each other. We ran the ball on first and second down almost every time. It would be third and long almost every time on the most drives after running the ball. And Shedeur was put in a position where, it's third and predictable, and it's not really where you want to be as a, guy making his first start. Then that said, the route trees, kind of the plays being called were just not the most advanced for a player like Shedeur, who's, like I said, making his first start, and I went into all of that, so that all makes sense. But I think those two things do not, add up for the most productive offensive game. And to be fair, they didn't need to be in this one. I think they squeezed more out of the offense, though, considering those two factors, than expected. So that's a positive. But the offense definitely has plenty of room to continue to grow as we go, and hopefully wrap up the season on a higher note than we've started it so far. That said, the only other thing I really noticed was Jerry Jeudy. The body language is just screams a guy who's checked out. And for a guy like Jerry, in my opinion, who does not have the cachet to be acting the way he is currently. I think it's really, really troubling, and the more troubling thing for me is that the rest of the locker room is not like that. It's really only Jerry Jeudy right now. A couple times in this game, he wasn't involved much, because I think after that fumble in the first half, I think Kevin was kind of just like, dude, we're not going to throw you the ball anymore if this is how it's going to be. So flashback to even before then. There's a play I think it was actually the first or second drive the Browns had in this game. It's a third and long. Shedeur is, of course, throwing it because it's 3rd and 10, because we ran the ball for no yards on 2 plays. And he kind of throws it down the sideline. Jeudy was in one-on-one, and the ball would have been catchable had Jerry continued to run his route. This is something that I think was not shown well on the TV broadcast, but whenever you watch it on tape, like, if Jerry was giving his full effort in that play, there's a chance he actually gets to the football, or, who knows, maybe like draws pass interference or something, but the guy just fully stopped. Thankfully, the Raiders cornerback was stopped with him, because he probably realized, oh, there's no shot of Jerry actually getting to this ball because he's not trying. And it was an incompletion. It made the play for Shedeur look a lot worse on the TV broadcast, but once you watch it back on the tape, you kind of just realize Shedeur just stopped, Jerry just stopped trying on that play. So, of course, there's that one. Then I honestly think it might have been the next time the ball was thrown to Jerry was the fumble. So, like, these are two instances, and then you get to the second half where Jerry was pretty much uninvolved, where it's just it's really getting to be pretty concerning with Jerry. And we heard the interviews and kind of the just drama that he created and the bad moods he was in over the past week. And I think we all hoped that maybe he was just having a bad day, but I think after watching this past game, I think he's checked out on the team. And I would say you can't blame him, but the rest of the team isn't doing that. And Jerry's been in the league long enough to expect more from a guy like that. So I think Jerry is on a fast track of getting himself, if not out of the league, some significantly reduced contracts and effectiveness and reliance on a team. Because if he can't shine on a Browns offense where the next best receiver is Cedric Tillman, who can only play half the games, and in that he's not even the leading receiver. The leading receiver is a tight end who's a rookie. I'm not too sure where he's going to find success in this league. But that's all I have for Jerry. He has to pick it up. He needs to put a good run together in these last 6 games. And as Browns fans, we really should hope he can, because we have him under contract, and our wide receiver room is going to need all the help it can get, even if we do utilize assets and go out there and hopefully draft some sort of wide receiver next year early in the draft. So that kind of wraps up my takeaways offensively. The only thing I wanted to note defensively, apart from the fact that, yes, it was a dominant game, like everything we saw on the TV broadcast, checks out. Defensive line was ridiculous in this one. The only thing I wanted to note was that Mason Graham was really, really good. Like, A+ game from Mason Graham. He was there was a spree in the second half where every single play Mason Graham was blowing something up, just pushing a guy back 10 yards. He was on one of those runs. So super promising to see from him. And yeah, the defense played great. We knew that. Don't have to get too much into that with the tape on that. But ultimately, big news today was really regarding Shedeur and how he will take over as the starting quarterback for this team. My only goal that I would set for Shedeur doesn't have anything to do with stats, yards per game, quarterback rating, PFF grade. Like, it doesn't have anything to do with that, because he's a rookie. He's playing in his second game this weekend. So my only goal, and I think this is a good way to think about it if you're Shedeur, is to make sure you do whatever you need to do to start every game the rest of the year. Just make sure at the end of the season you have started 7 games. Because in doing so, you will have presumptively played well enough to keep your starting job in the eyes of the coaching staff, and probably also gotten some wins along the way. And that's all that needs to be said. We don't need to, drive ourselves crazy about, he only threw 207 yards, or he only threw 195 yards and 1 touchdown, or he threw a couple picks. Like, we don't need to get ourselves wrapped up in all that. I think for a guy who was a 5th round pick and who has talent but needs to put things together, the important thing for him and this football team, who is looking to draft a quarterback, if not convinced otherwise, is really just that Shedeur does start the rest of these games and puts good tape out there. To me, that's a win-win. Like, if he can do that, he'll be happy because, you know, he did all he could do. He played good enough to keep the job for the remainder of the season. And from the Browns' perspective, you know, that probably means we got some competent quarterback play at the minimum, and hopefully better than that. And maybe we win some games and start to build some momentum going into next year. Who knows who the quarterback will be? Maybe they draft somebody. Maybe Shedeur plays well enough that it's him. But I think either way, that's a good scenario. So that would be my only goal for Shedeur. Don't get wrapped up in the stats if you're a fan. Try to avoid that trap. It just, you know, this isn't a guy who's trying to make an MVP case. He's a guy who's just trying to get better every week. He's super early in his career, and we need to kind of tamper our expectations on that, you know, mark. But that's all I have for today's Browns news. You know, as we progress along the week, I'm sure we'll hear more, you know, from Shedeur. I'm sure he'll have a press conference coming up, so it's always interesting to hear from him. He always has pretty interesting lines. So there's always things to talk about with the Browns, man. But as always, I will have content out to you guys later on this week with another pod. Until then, enjoy your holiday. If I don't see you until after then, enjoy the football games on Thanksgiving. And I will see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.